Welcome, everyone. My name is Mikhiel Tareen. I'm one of the founders of Seam AI. We are a data platform that helps companies enrich their CRM records by leveraging AI models like Perplexity and OpenAI. The topic of the conversation today is what we call AI data enrichment. And I'm biased, I'm bullish on this space, but is this the future of go-to-market data? How can you think about it? How can you be leveraging AI now? Where do we think it's going to go? And we have two phenomenal panelists with us who are going to do most of the talking today. So quick agenda. We're going to start. I'll just have one slide that walks through what we define AI enrichment as. Then we'll talk about how it can help you right now, and then just some more fun hypotheses about the future that we might not all agree on. So hopefully it gets a little spicy. So again, my name is Mikhiel. I'm one of the co-founders of Seam AI. My background is in sales. I worked at Okta for 5 years. Started this company about a year ago. Marshall, I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Marshall Hamilton, Director of Business Systems Operations here at Sprout, with a focus on all of our internal AI deployments. And Conrad, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Conrad. I lead the marketing operations team at Rippling, and I've been here for about a year and a half.
Marshall, I think you have the coolest job title in the world. There must be dozens of you out there.
There's a few of us, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I'll just explain this slide so everyone understands what we're talking about here. And this definition, I think, is a little bit fluid, but for the sake of the conversation, I think this is what we're talking about. So what is AI enrichment? AI enrichment is leveraging AI models to improve your CRM records with new research, summaries, buying signals, ICP attributes, whatever you can find. And I think the call out here is this can apply to fetching you net new data. So going out into the web and finding information that you don't have before, or it can be applying AI to your internal data and making it more actionable, different format, cleaner, whatever it might be. Example of that would be applying AI to your Gong calls, transcripts, and pulling out medics so that you can sync it into the right fields in Salesforce, just for example. Okay, so 4 just quick examples to get people's minds going. These are all from companies that we're working with. So things like enriching the accounts, the Salesforce account, with a summary of the most recent 10K, recent news articles or blog posts that mention relevant keywords to your business. Another example is pulling information from the account's website, like open roles or security certs. Do they have SOC 2 or not SOC 2? Or technical details about their product from their documentation. On the internal data side, bucketing accounts into your specific industries or sub-industries, or bucketing titles into your specific personas. That's something that AI is very good at. And then 4 is identifying if an account or contact is mentioned on a competitor's website, for example, because maybe you know that you don't want to sell to them, or maybe you do. So that is AI enrichment. I think this can take multiple different forms. There are things like Clay that everyone is excited about. They do a lot of AI enrichment stuff around pulling data from the web. This could take the form of AI SDRs in some capacity that are prospecting. So the way that this presents itself, or how the product looks, can look a little different. Okay, let's kick things off. Let's just start with, what are the big shifts that you're seeing in the world of B2B data? And I know, Conrad, that you have been looking at a lot of data providers for your role. Curious, like, what you're noticing and shifts from the traditional model of ZoomInfo. It's like they have credits, you buy credits. Is that the same? It's this database that you're pulling from. Is it changing? Feel free to take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest shift that I'm seeing, we're actually in the process of doing a wider scale vendor evaluation of new data and intent providers.
Oh, you're going to get so many emails now.
Yeah, seriously. I would say the biggest shift, though, that we're finding in all of these conversations is that the sort of historical world was like accessing static databases that were either bought or refreshed on an ongoing cadence, like the Apollos, the ZoomInfos, those of the world essentially would have their data source in their database that they refresh on some form of a cadence that they probably buy from other providers. And moving away from that world, which gives you little visibility into usually how accurate the data is, when was it refreshed, things like that, and into a world where it's like Uber Eats sort of thing, where you're actually like requesting it to go do following things and come back with something. And so the idea there is, like, a lot of the companies are shifting more towards a business model which does a lot more first party, third party, private versus public data scraping. And it may not be exactly done in real time. And it's like a request process that will come back. But what we're finding is like the coverage model for, say, other countries or other signal types or attributes on the company's website or things that might be a little bit harder to access are now becoming much more consumable by the end user. And so I would say that's the biggest shift that I'm seeing, but I'm curious to get Marshall's take on what he's seeing.
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of the same findings. And I think what we're seeing is this progression from those static databases, then you went into this waterfall enrichment methodology. And now we're getting this world where people want a lot more targeting. We're all trying to be a lot scrappier with the ways that we target and go after our accounts and be a little bit more hammer nail versus, I think, just blunt instrument is how a lot of teams had operated over the last 10 years. What's really interesting is web scraping and mass data ingestion was unattainable unless you had a large team to support it. There's a lot of undigested data would come back. And now AI has given us the ability to digest and pre-digest some of that data to give us a little bit more of a consumable entity. So in addition to the third parties we do work with, we also have this ability to ingest customized data that's really specialized for our business in particular. We work with agencies, but our definition of an agency might be different than what ZoomInfo's definition of an agency is. And so us being able to reclassify some of that data based on our own parameters has really helped us to make the most of the data that we're pulling through.
So AI is helpful for taking and call it unstructured data that you've maybe scraped and making sense of it in a way that it's actually actionable or usable. So you don't need that huge team.
Right.
Yeah. We're like there's such a problem that existed for so many companies that use multiple data vendors and enrichment vendors is they all have different like structures and formats of the data that they provide. And there's always the hackiest RevOps exercise to like join those things, merge them, waterfall them, and do that. And it's always been like such a nightmare to deal with if you, especially if you have a company like Rippling that's at very large scale, large TAM, big data. And so it is a common problem that I think AI will drastically help fix is sort of normalizing, transforming, merging of data sets in a really intelligent way is like very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this isn't written on the slide, but how many different data providers, and you can classify those as like AI, not AI, scrapers, you can name names, but you don't have to. Like, how many do you think that your companies leverage?
We've got at least 7 to 10-ish, probably, I would say, from a data provider and 10 provider, maybe even more. Honestly, now that I'm like racking my brain about it, probably more, maybe closer to 10 to 15. So a fair amount. Yeah.
I'd say we're probably in the range of 5 to 6 formally. And then informally, it's a much wider swath. If you need one-off custom data sets for hospitals and the number of hospital beds that they have, or franchises and the number of locations, we might have an informal data source that we pull down. And so contracted probably 5 to 6. And then there's this kind of wide swath of free data that exists on the web that we pull in and try to massage into our workflows.
Yeah, nice. Connor, I had a question for you about that, like the delivery model that you described, where instead of a static database, is that more, are you seeing that for the rep? Or maybe we zoom out as like for this enrichment stuff, the way you've described it, are these like back-end systems that RevOps are owning, or is these also something that like an AE could go to? I know that you're marketing ops, but is there a self-service component for individuals or ICs, or is this more like the back-end systems?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's mostly the back-end systems. And the reason I'm saying that is that like a lot of the data and technology that's available today, like you would only be able to execute with the proper data engineering work and the proper technical research. Like AI hasn't gotten to a point that's so easily adjustable and prompt engineering and configurable for an end user to do it in an easy way. And so when I think about the world of like web scraping or running LLMs on like large data sets, text data sets and things, it's like usually requiring sort of an engineer to handle that. And so a lot of what we do today is fully on the back end, but I'm seeing the shift happen where it's moving away from like that technical and end user having to manage it and maintain it to actually like platforms helping us bridge that gap. So I do see there's a shift that's happening there, but
yeah. And this kind of transitions us into question number 2, but there's a lot out there around sales cockpits or rep cockpits, where it's a place for a salesperson to go where they can research accounts, get insights on accounts, get signals on accounts. Maybe there's a question more for Marshall, but have you looked into any of those at all? Or what do you think about those? Do you buy a tool for that? Is that just like a company GPT license that you use? Like, how do you think about that use case that's coming up?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we're seeing more people go down that span. And to Conrad's earlier point is there's so many tools and systems providing intent data and kind of these signals We spent the last 5 or 6 years really building up this like massive corpus of data. And then we say, BDR, go figure out what all this means and how to approach it. And that's really tough. It's like tough to do that efficiently. It's tough to do that with any skill. And you see the really strong ones pick and choose wisely and work through. And a lot of people struggle with that. And so going back to that pre-digested piece, we've looked at tools that exist in the space that play this role of digesting and pulling together an account dossier or like an approach dossier. We have some tools that are doing it for us. You've got tools like LinkedIn has their new Sales Insights AI that kind of pulls things together. But internally, we have like a custom GPT that's deployed that does all that and just from all of our systems, including our support tickets and our previous sales interactions, and kind of just puts this together into a nice package so somebody can approach this well. But I think as we think about the span of this, that's good if you have the resources to pull off prompt engineering and maintain and sustain this. I think we are seeing more tools trying to go into this exploratory phase of how do we ingest more data with the interest of giving you like a really specific product back. So V1 of a lot of these Gen AI products was, hey, you have a bunch of information, let's serve it back to you from questions. Now it's how do I give you a really custom and specific deliverable? We're seeing that kind of packaged together as some of these tools kind of evolve in the market. And that structured output is going to be helpful as you start thinking about the next phase of this, which is how do you have AI respond to some of these emails? How do you have AI actually take action reliably? And so it's a really interesting space for us to go into. So we have a few tools that we've deployed for sure, but for the bulk of it, we're still doing some custom work.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add in one thing there, Mick. I definitely want to do a huge plus one in that because I think a lot of the AI sort of like signal-based vendors today, or if you took the 6 sensor demand-based sort of software and layered on some AI, but what you're limited by is the signals and the integrations that they can provide from the vendor. But what's missing today, and that's why I think Marshall mentioned like custom deployments internally, because I do think that's the way it's the most effective as it sits today. And the way I think about like at Rippling, it's like if I wanted to go take every gong call transcript, I wanted to take every signal intent provider provided, every email copy from every email that's been sent or replied to from a rep, like every phone call that's been recorded. If you wanted to do all of that data work and run it through a model to then summarize or give an output that's like accessible via reps and that's like very useful, the only way you'd be able to do that is some custom deployment you have internally, because a lot of the tools out there today like really struggle with the big data aggregation and like connections to your warehouse and do things. And there are vendors and tools coming out that support that now, but I think that's like where the line gets drawn.
Yeah, totally. I think about kind of what Marshall said. The next phase is AI maybe responding to some of these emails or sending the emails for you. And in SDR's workflow, half the work is finding external data from the internet. And then the other half of the work is figuring out the context for the account. So what happened previously from gone calls, what happened in opportunities. And to your point, Conrad, a lot of these systems have an API connection to Salesforce or something like that. And they're missing 90% of that internal data that I think really limits its ability to be useful and like proactive in some ways. Cool. So zooming out a little bit more, Marshall, we've talked about this a little bit in the past. So you mentioned the use case of summarizing account history. I think that's a great one. Like what other kind of things are you using AI for? Data specific or more just go-to-market specific? And it could be custom GPTs or whatever, but like what other kind of stuff are you doing?
Yeah, I think for us, we've seen a really strong use case in just mass summarization of data and classification data that we haven't seen before. And so two that I'll call out. One is just product feedback is universal. It comes through in all sorts of shapes and forms. You've got gong calls, you've got emails, you've got customer support tickets, you've got just like market news and responses to things like our public earnings calls. It would take someone countless hours to go through and classify that data, pull out all the individual insights and package it in a way that will allow our product teams to digest and interact with that super well. So now we can use AI to pull all that data in, classify it, pull out all the product insights across each of our places, and then actually deliver those insights along with how it ties into our broader OKRs as a digestible input. So we have a process that's running that each month and says, here's your specific zone or domain's product feedback. Here's the things that we heard in the last month, and here's the stuff that we need to work on, or areas of opportunity. On the other side of that, we started to see this classification. And so a project I'm working on right now with our SDR BDR team is one project when I was in RevOps was, hey, let's have somebody look at all of the emails that are being sent by our outbound teams, try to classify like how customized was it? Was there a good call to action, and try to rank that. It's really hard to do that kind of work. And it's just massively time consuming and almost low value enough where you're like, I don't know, if I'm going to spend a whole headcount to go run on that. So now we can have AI actually pre-digest and try to give some rankings through prompting on what kind of email was this and what's the classification. We started creating some custom grading scales on how effective those emails are. So we can start monitoring emails in real time on the effectiveness and coach to it. And so it's been this really good way of us saying, hey, here's actually the low value classification work that we used to hire an outside firm to do. We can now do in-house and classify it the way we want to classify it and really rapidly iterate on how that impacts our business. So those are two use cases we've been deploying that are super effective and have really helped us hit the ground running this year.
Yeah, cool. And are those through custom GPTs?
Some are. So some are running through in-house prompts that we put together, and then other ones are starting with an AI tool that we've purchased and then sub-synthesized through custom work as well.
Cool. I think what I'm getting at is for the custom GPT part, what's the lift of that? Or could anyone do that? Is it hard or what's hard about it? What's it like setting that up?
Yeah, it depends on your approach. So if you want to do custom GPTs through like ChatGPT's OpenAI or OpenAI's, it's a little bit of Python scripting to pull in the data and have it cycle through it. It's pretty effective and cost efficient to do that work. If you want to run it through a custom GPT natively within something like ChatGPT, that's also doable through some API work. But I think the thing that we'll talk about a lot through these AI shifts is like the democratization of some of these skill sets. You don't have to be an expert in Python anymore to pull this stuff off. You can be like modestly proficient and make your way through a lot of these workflows.
Yeah.
If you don't know anything about Python, a little hard to get started, but if like enough to be dangerous and enough to check the work, you can get yourself to a deliverable product a lot faster and easier than we've ever been able to see before.
Yeah. Great. Cool. Conrad, do you have anything to add around just how you leverage AI, whether it's on the data enrichment side or acquiring data or making sense data, or just in other email writing, something like that?
Yeah, we've spoken previously about like email copy generation via AI. We've done a lot there. We have a full engine of generating copies for SDRs. We have a big SDR org, a 200 to 300 person SDR org in Rippling. And so we've done a lot of work there, which is really great. I think there's one example that we're working on right now that is pretty interesting. We have obviously a global website, a bunch of locales in different regions of the world for our website. And we are, as of right now, we are trying to categorize our pages on our website by product. So if we have, say, hundreds or thousands of blog posts that talk about, we have a wide variety of products. We aren't a single solution at Rippling. And so it's really difficult for us to categorize like people go into these pages, like what product are they actually interested in, and using that as like a signal to generate some marketing campaigns against it. And so what we're doing right now is we're building a little bit of web scraping internally to navigate and crawl our website, scrape all of the raw text off of it, and then even like the image metadata and all this stuff. And we're going to actually run that through an LLM internally. And then what we're going to do is actually categorize every URL and page via this model by product. And then anybody who navigates to these pages and then maybe goes through a form submission on our website, like a demo request, will actually show like what is their product interest based on the pages and the content that they've viewed on our website. And we're using AI to help do that mass categorization and mass classification. And so that's something that's like going to be launching here pretty soon that we're pretty excited about. Yeah.
That's cool. So that services, is it for the sales rep to say, hey, this is what this person.
Exactly right. Sales rep and marketing audience building. So for sales reps, it's every lead that comes through the door on a form submission. We would actually, alongside that lead, we would say, hey, by the way, like they showed a lot of product interest in this X product. And then the talk track for them on the phone or on the email is like to discuss that product specifically. We also are actually going to be routing leads to specific product teams based on that data, which is pretty interesting. But then the second piece is if I am a company that has 20 products and I'm a marketer and I need to build an audience to go execute a campaign by product, how do I want to know what's the best people to market to besides just their persona? Persona is a good way, but it's not like the best way. And identifying people's product interests is like a much tighter, stronger signal. And so we're using it for that as well, audience building.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So it used to be just segment on personas, and now you can segment on personas, and then the products they've looked at. And I can just imagine how many different audiences you guys cut. Thousands. Cool.
So
Anything else anyone wants to add here? Any other cool use cases? I think this is the stuff that gets people excited. If not, no problem.
Oh, there's no, it's interesting that the use cases when Gen AI first exploded on the scene last year as, hey, it's been around for a little bit and now we're starting to see the kind of these business use cases evolve. It was a little further along than I think the tech actually is, but the really interesting and compelling use cases are the ones that we're talking about where it's like some behind the scenes work to
Mhm.
do data classification. And it feels like stuff that Conrad, if you ever had somebody go and classify all those pages yourself, you would never do the project. It would take way too
Right.
much time, and it's like an impossible task for the amount of value it actually generates. But now that you can rip this out super quickly, classify it, and iterate it super fast, this like technical, really non-sexy work is getting automated with AI, and it delivers huge value on the other side because you can operationalize it faster. And I think that's the transition, going back to the beginning, is like that we're seeing with this AI shift is it's not the, hey, robots are taking the world piece. It's actually like robots are being injected into these really small, specific business processes and making a big impact on the other end.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Cool. I think we've talked about the benefits enough. How do you guys evaluate AI tools? There's a lot of noise out there. I think there's a lot of hype. A lot of it's not real. A lot of it is real. Like, how do you make sure that it'll work? How do you test it? Like, how do you think about evaluating some of these tools?
Yeah. I can give my quick little blurb on it that we've been doing in this big evaluation that we've been had some AI, some intent-based and things like that. And so I think historically, a lot of times it was enough for like demos, long information calls, like content, having discussions like that was enough for people to see the value in a solution and buy it. I think AI, given it's like such a hot topic and it's such a word that's used now at wide scale, whether or not a company is actually truly an AI platform or not, I think this is like the increased importance of like POCs. And I think a lot of these companies are starting to go more towards a product-led growth motion, a free trial motion, like allowing for POCs that are easy to execute, see the value in, and then go from there. And what we're doing a lot of is like requesting like access to things, POCs, and really vetting what is the power of the tool or not. I think like the possibilities are greater now, which means there's a lot more like validation that needs to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, on our end, I'd echo all the things that Conrad just mentioned. I think like we have a really robust security and compliance side of this evaluation too, is like this tech is interesting. And a lot of these tools have gotten better about having a standard set of governance. And MIT actually just released like this massive document of AI risks for businesses, and that's a good reference point. But I think even operationally, the two things I'm most interested in nowadays is longevity. I don't think we're making decisions beyond a year, any of us, because the tech is moving so fast. But I need something that I can build on, right? Can I do something with this right now that has immediate value? And then is it something that I can sustain for more and more projects in the future? And the reason for that is I don't want our teams to have to interact with 30 different tools to accomplish the goal. That actually puts us in a position that a lot of us got into 6 years ago with sales tech.
Mhm.
And then I think the second part of it is surfaces, right? So where are people interacting with this? And what we found is a lot of these tools, if they exist in their own domains and we have to wire them up and we can make it work, people just don't go to them. I think if you're not really jazzed about the topic, you're not engaging with AI as much as I think people think that you are. And so we wanted to make sure we brought AI to the people who are supposed to be ingesting this. And so either that's using backend processes to deliver the insights to where they are, or producing it in surfaces like Slack or Chrome or wherever we're going to put it that actually helps them with their jobs. And I think if we don't nail the surfaces where they interact with it, we end up with really low adoption, and it's interesting but not valuable. And then that longevity piece of I don't want to have 40 things doing the same thing. I want to have a couple things that do it really well. Not to say we can't have specialized use cases, but like minimizing that spread is really important.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's well said. A theme that we think about is I think a lot of these AI tools, they're really flexible, right? If you look at Clay, it can do almost anything. And so there's this component of like prompt engineering, which is really challenging. I think that comes into a couple ways. One is when you're evaluating a tool, you might try it, it might not really work, and you might give up. So I think it's on vendors to do some hand holding and say, hey, what are you actually trying to accomplish here? And we can help you with the prompts. And then the other side of it, to Marshall's point, is salespeople aren't super patient. They're not great at adopting new tools. And if they get burned with a bad prompt that they wrote, they might never go back. Right. And so I think there's some value in how do we deliver the information to them so they don't have to go to this thing and try and figure out the best way to prompt it. Because I personally find prompting even just can be frustrating at times. It's like a different mindset that you need to get your head into. Cool. What about data quality and accuracy? This rolls into the POC thing, Conrad. I'm sure you guys do some testing and like validation, but overall in the world of data enrichment, there's some precedent to it not being perfect, right? Like Zoom info isn't 100% accurate, Apollo isn't either. So how do you guys balance that? Do you expect the same sort of accuracy? Do you expect better? How do you validate it?
Yeah. The mechanisms of acquisition have got more sophisticated. And so I think the expectation is things are more accurate. And what I mean by mechanisms is like the ability to crawl and extract data from public websites and things like that, that you would expect to be more accurate. One of the big signals for Rippling is job posting data. So is a company hiring or not hiring, and what types of roles are they hiring for? Because we're an onboarding platform. And so a lot of like our ability to crawl like the Indeeds and the Monsters and LinkedIn and like these different public sort of websites that show job postings is like really valuable to us. And a lot of times, obviously, that's like a pretty accurate signal, right? We can see if it's active, it's not active. We can dedupe very easily to say, does the job on their website match the one that they have on LinkedIn or on Monster or Indeed? And so we have the ability to do that pretty effectively. And so I do think like the expectation of quality and accuracy has grown for sure. I think when you get into like PII and some like personal level data and things, there's always that like validation that needs to take place. And you're always going to have a little bit of situations where things aren't always accurate, just because of the world of sort of private data like that. But yeah, that's my 2 cents that at least from what we're seeing too, as well as we are finding, I would say, more accurate data and data that can be used in different ways than ever before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's this North Star of perfection in the sales world for data, and that I don't think that's attainable today, just because there is public versus private data. There's a lot of sources out there that conflict and refresh counts, but I do think the increase of AI tooling and the ease of ingestion of that data has made it so that we can increase refresh rates. We can better massage and set expectations around what that data should look like and feel like, which feels more accurate. If the expectation is set that, hey, we're going to refresh this data every 30 days, or we're going to operate in this way, sales teams know that's the refresh rate. They know what to expect. And that expectation really helps drive confidence in the accuracy of it. Even if in real time, we're not like 100% on like this, they hired 20 people or whatever. I think that we all have gotten more accustomed to like the data I see in our CRM and our systems reflects the data I see out in the world is much closer parity than it used to be. What's really interesting is I think the same checks still exist, is no matter what tooling we put out there, as data quality and accuracy checks still need to happen regardless, because bad data in, bad data out, right? If you ingest a bad source, which exists everywhere on the web, you are still going to get a bad output, but it's that massaging and then prompt engineering to make sure that you're directing these tools in the right way to give you the output you expect.
Yeah. Conrad touched on this, the power of getting data or information from sources that are self-maintained, right? So like scraping data from a hiring page is probably going to be more accurate than a provider that somehow finds that information on their own, maybe not from scraping. Or LinkedIn is, I always think, the kind of the gold standard for data. It's like when you leave companies, your LinkedIn doesn't change like your email does, right? When you get a new job, you update your LinkedIn faster than ZoomInfo could probably find that you changed your job. And some of this AI work and tools and scraping makes those sources way more attainable. So I think the expectation is higher that they'll be better, right? Cool. You touched on this, Conrad, but I was curious about privacy. Like some of these tools are getting really powerful.
Yeah.
This is more future looking. Should we expect a crackdown on that? I know LinkedIn is already like pretty strict about that, but there's always workarounds. How do you guys think about that world and what's going to happen? It's going to be new legislation.
I think terms of use, especially for like a LinkedIn, is cracking down. I do think the world is moving more towards private. You think about like a cookieless future on your website, right? The inability to install cookies to track user behaviors and user attributes is trimming. And so the world is going more private. But what I will say is like, at least from our experience, is identifying somebody that works for a particular account, what that account does, and what most likely is like their email format is not rocket science.
Yeah.
I do think that will persist for a while. So I do think there's ability to access and acquire private data that will pertain. I still think that world will be for a while now. But yeah, I think there's like public data sources are really good for like account level information, I would say. And I think like the private level data is obviously when you get into like person or signal based data is really where you have to find that balance. Some vendors do both, some do one or the other. Some you might have to acquire through a private static database like the ZoomInfos, and you have to live with a little bit of data quality issues. Some you might have to go extract real time. There's like it's probably an and statement. There's probably multiple pieces to do there. Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Marshall? Should we move on?
Yeah, privacy is a big piece. I think the only thing I'd add on, and we're starting to see the first kind of tendrils of this movement is licensing and partnerships is going to become more and more important for data. And I think you're seeing it on the larger LLM side where news media was like, hey, you're taking all of our traffic. Let's build a partnership so we get revenue. And I think scraping, as it continues to proliferate and become more accessible for everyone, becomes this next phase of how do we get that data in a way that sustains the web as we know it. And I think you'll see more businesses partner and create more avenues to make that data accessible that isn't just raw scraping. But I do think it's going to be this new economic model of data access that happens over time to combat kind of the loss of revenue or the loss of traction that we get otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're getting into the future looking stuff, but that's one that I see coming quickly.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Okay, I want to go to number 2 here. I think there's a lot of stuff we've talked about that makes you excited. We can go back to it at the end, but if you had a magic wand, what would you want AI to be able to do in the context of RevOps, data, go to market? This is one of those pie in the sky ones.
I think this is an interesting one. Just having this conversation with our sales teams earlier this week. In the sales capacity, there's a lot of friction in the processes that happen today. And you can wire up kind of individual things that fill out notes in CRM and deliver back to different teams. It's a really friction-filled environment. We want them to go sell, and then we give them a lot of things they have to go do. And so I think everyone wants this aspiration of a true co-pilot to sales that does a lot of that friction-filled work for them and gives a great output. And today it's arduous to stand up and maintain and keep it going. And I think there's a perfect world where AI can watch somebody do their job, learn those friction points and fill in the gaps for them. And I don't think that's as far off as it might seem. Like there's classifications of jobs going on right now with different tools, like Mimica is a good example, where it puts a recorder on your screen, watches you do your job for 2 weeks and comes back with how much of your job can be automated, which is a really interesting use case. But I think that step of how do we watch someone do a process 1,000 times and then automate it for them so they don't have to do it anymore is really powerful.
Yeah. There's probably, I totally agree with that. That's super interesting, by the way. I haven't heard of that. But the increase in efficiency that could happen across the business is probably much greater than what we think it is today, just based on where the technology sits, AI technology sits. I think the big thing for me, the magic wand, is actually probably in the short future, which is great, is like bridging that gap I talked about earlier between what is required from, say, like custom internal homegrown engineering type builds to actually empowering like the end users that have all the business context and have sort of the understanding of the data and how the data is used to actually interact with AI, adjust it, model it, do all of that work. I do think that as of today, there is a little bit of a delay based on our ability to we have to tap into resources that can access these things a little bit more. And from a technical standpoint, it is getting easier, to Marshall's point earlier about how dangerous you can be with a few technical.
Yeah, but you still need to know a little bit of Python.
Yeah. And so the idea is actually giving it to the end users, all the context, having them move fast, I think will actually create a lot of those efficiencies that Marshall just discussed with the org. Yeah.
Yeah. Any core problems or blockers that you think is really holding AI back? Anything that once we figure out, oh man, this thing's going to be everywhere. I think security is one that comes to mind for me. It's like still a Wild West in some ways. I think technical know-how is still a bit of a blocker. Does anything else come to mind that is like holding the industry back?
I think the thing that's holding what's holding back the most is, I think when people when they go to purchase an AI software, they think it's a little bit more plug and play, and they forget how much actual prompt engineering do things take to actually get it to fit your business requirements or your business needs. And so I think like one example is when we went down the route of personalizing emails at scale, we had put a date on it. Oh, let's just tap into multiple sort of AI providers and like they'll write an email and it's probably going to be pretty good. And we had set a date for 30 days later or something, and that quickly turned into 3 months, right? Because it was like, on a second, we got to talk to them about our personas, our writing styles, our templates. We're a 20 product platform. We got to talk about each of those products. It became this like crazy exercise. Context, power this thing, force it. Like it was like required so much energy and resources from us to get it right. Now, once it's right, it's very effective because now we're like very hands off and it can be effective. But yeah, that's I think a missing piece of the puzzle. And I do think that's like the slight like blocker for increased adoption and things like that.
Yeah. Just to add to that, it's like most of these tools are also in their earliest phases. And I'm sure they all have something in their MSA where they can use the data that you give it, de-anonymized and all that good stuff to make their tool better. And so I think the tools that will get better out of the box as they get more use cases that they're handling, more data, and they can understand things better. I think that's a great call out, Conrad. Marshall, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think just too, there's the core problem is I think these models are probably 1 to 2 iterations away from where we all really wish that we would actually be. And building on that point, like we overestimate where this actually is in many use cases. It's like a lot of work to make this consistent and reliable enough to deploy, especially in a customer facing capacity. And so it could be right 95% of that time. But that 5% is dangerous depending on what capacity you use this. And I think that there's a piece there of reliability that we want to make sure we can get solved, or at least try to have better guardrails around prevention. The other one is there's still a cultural hesitation around AI. Like I think if you're really into this space, it's easy to get caught up in the hype and like the
In the
news.
bubble,
And
yeah.
there's 17 research papers a week on new forms of RAG and all it's really interesting if you like it. If you're apprehensive about it and you're unfamiliar with it, this is a really scary time for a lot of members of businesses. And I think that there's that cultural hesitation to adopt it that needs a lot of work and enablement, a lot of conversation, and a lot of exposure on like, how does this work and why is this beneficial to you? And how is this a benefit, not a risk to you?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big piece that we spend a ton of time working on here is just talking about it, making sure it's front and center on it. We're really public about here's what we're working on, both externally in our product, internally as our process, and how we're thinking about talking about it. And I think also encouraging people to really adopt this more fluidly, because it is, if you're not familiar enough with it, it's like, ooh, this is shiny, to this is very scary for my job or my function or what this looks like in the future. And that's a really tough thing for people to get over.
Yeah.
People quickly turn on it too. I'll just add to that, like when it doesn't work or it messes up, especially in the email copywriting world, we'd see a few things and people would be like, oh, we have to go back to the human written stuff because it's reliable and it's this. And so people are hyped on it and then very quickly turn from it. And so identifying just like simple use cases that you feel confident in is probably like the best place to start. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think this question is similar to this, but how do you guys get past kind of the black box syndrome and convince teams to try it or trust it? I'll leave it there. That's one question from the audience.
Yeah, small use cases to start, something that can prove value. I would say AI, you go to the far end of the spectrum of what is like the ultimate level of possibility this thing can do, replacing sales reps, replacing support things. But at the end of the day, it's pick something that is a pain point in the business, that is something you believe like an algorithm or a type process can do effectively. Start there, and then you can continuously build on it. And I think it will take some internal convincing and a cultural shift like Marshall meant, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of confidence building that needs to happen with this to get people okay with the outputs that come out. And I think going through that hands-on process, like I hold office hours every week with my team and then with the broader company. And the reason for that is actually just be like, tell me what you want to do, and let's break it down to its smallest components and see how much we can trust this. But really actually showing here's where it falters and here's things that you shouldn't be offloading yet helps people rationalize like this is where it's beneficial or valuable. I think getting hands-on more and not just I tried it once, it did something shiny for me, and then I tried it again and it did something terrible. You guys are like really push people and say, hey, use this 10 times a day for the next week and let's talk about the output. That gives people a feel of what the boundaries are and where that kind of limitation starts to happen. But I also see things like really great and powerful use cases like, hey, I received 20 PDFs this week from various like members of our team, and I need to synthesize this into something meaningful. That's a pretty safe use case. You can get a pretty good V1 copy of an output there.
Yeah.
If you're like, hey, I'm going to do a massive public-facing marketing campaign based on all this AI, you're probably going to want a bunch of people in the loop to edit and be a part of that process and really be hands-on. I think helping them understand the difference between those use cases and what you need to put in place is going to help.
Yeah. I think of some scenarios from our customers, and I'll zoom in on one general use case because I think it's traditionally not trusted even before AI, is the concept of scoring accounts, leads, contacts. And I think in the sales community, they've been burned on bad scores. It's like this account's supposed to be really good and it's bad, or vice versa. And I think one of the nice things about LLMs in the context of scoring or enriching, 'cause it's a bunch of the use cases that we support, is finding all this really custom information that is ICP specific for a company and then ultimately turning it into a score. And what you can do with the LLM is you can explain the score. You can say, hey, here's the score that we give it, and here's why. And I think that sort of unveils the black box a little bit. And another tangible example is we work with a company that it's important for them to sell to companies that have complex systems, so like multi-tenancy. That's what they're looking for. And there's no binary answer to that, right? You can't find that online necessarily. You can look at their technical documentation, you can look at the types of folks that they hire, you can look at all these different things, but ultimately it's like, do they have multi-tenancy? Yes, no. And so with us, the output is yes, we think so, and here's why, no, and here's why. So you can shed a little bit light because LLMs are great at explaining why they're doing things the way they're doing them. What kind of skills should RevOps professionals be thinking about right now? Should they go learn Python? Are there other things that they should go think about?
I'm an advocate of everyone learning Python, but that's pretty specific to me. No, I think prompt engineering is something we throw around, but really it's just effective writing. And it's something that I think everyone should work on in this context is we're working our way towards a world where we interact with computers differently, we interact with systems differently, and effective writing is going to be paramount to getting the output you want out of every system in the future.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that RevOps professionals always should care about because of documentation and its explainability, but it's going to become really impactful. And I think the other one is systems design is really important.
Mhm.
And I think we have a level of that in RevOps sometimes if this system needs to connect here or this needs to go here. I think you need to take it a step deeper of like thinking about data flows and thinking about actually how data transforms throughout that process and get a little bit more of a universal skill set on that. Because as these tools proliferate, you're going to have more and more systems that can interact with and transform and massage this data in different ways. And understanding where and how this needs to inject itself is going to be really critical to effective usage.
Yeah, to that point, I don't know how new this is, but to me it seems new, is this category of growth engineers. I know Rippling has a group of them. They're really technical folks that are really good at connecting systems, and then they can power like tremendous volume and personalization, and really their technical resource. And so I think the world is moving in that way, but at the same time, AI is making it less technical. So we'll see where it goes. But I agree with that theme, Marshall, for sure. Conrad, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think you both touched on it well. My quick 2 cents is I think the more technical you are, the more opportunity there is for value add. I do think you can do a lot more if you're technical internally. We strive to make my team internally. Most of the team knows SQL. We have a lot of people learning Python. They're trying to figure out how they can do a lot more with connecting data sources and data aggregation and modeling and doing things like that. Highly recommend, but to Mick, you called it out really well, which is a world going into like potentially less technical or with these systems that can operate with a non-technical user and do things. I don't want it to deter from the fact that being like a really good business professional is like something you still want to continue doing. So I think find that healthy balance that can make you effective technically, but ensure that you are obviously a person that is reliable in the business and someone that can communicate business outcomes and do things like that effectively.
Yeah. Great call. Can't lose the big picture. Here's something that I do. This is like a little AI hack for the audience. For prompt engineering specifically, I ask the LLM first, I want you to write me a prompt that does this, and then use that prompt to then get whatever I want. And you can just rinse and repeat that prompt. But it's a little cheat. You don't have to write the best prompt. You can have AI write the best prompt because it knows what it needs. So I'll just leave that there. Any questions from the audience that we haven't addressed? I have other questions, but where do you guys think the biggest opportunity is for AI across the different go-to-market functions? Like marketing, sales, CS. Marshall, you called out the customer feedback. It's a great one. Conrad, you called out enriching for like more specific audience building. We've talked about sales co-pilots. Do you guys have any opinions on the department that will have the most change as a result of wider AI adoption?
Yeah. I think like slightly different take on the question, but I think like data centralization is like huge. Like all of these companies, those different groups and business units you just discussed, like all interact with their data in their own way. And there's a ton of isolation and silos that happen. And so I think a lot of what we're doing internally is like centralizing all of our go-to-market data.
And that helps everyone, right?
What's up?
That helps everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like a big piece of this whole puzzle is like, how can we store, normalize, connect, join all of this big data into sort of a single location? I think that's what's really critical. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd echo that as I think we collect a lot of data in a lot of different places. Everyone interacts with it slightly differently and has preferences on data. And I think we talked about this in other contexts, but the preference from best in class provider for tools to now being what connects data best, I think there's an interesting trade-off that's starting to happen because the democratization of data is something that's super powerful. Like we're living in a world where we went to big data And then you had to have technical ability to interact or work with that data in some capacity. So that kind of blocked people off. And now we're moving back to, with a little bit of technical resource, you can get access to a massive amount of data. And so I think what's changing is these teams are starting to see impact, not because something's fundamentally changed, other than their access to data is changing. I think the data centralization piece is the most important, getting your data in the right place. If you're not already starting that project or haven't already worked on this, there is no point to not start now. This is the most important thing that I think people need to figure out, because it is going to be the most powerful accelerator for a business in the immediate term, but also it's going to be impactful as these technologies evolve. And its ability to interact with your data is going to be critical to success.
My spicy take is that whatever beats Salesforce or replaces Salesforce, is it another CRM? It's a warehouse with a front end, an AI front end. Because that warehouse, the data model of Salesforce is really rigid, and it's really hard to centralize everything in it, no matter what you do. And that's why companies roll out a warehouse and they ETL data into a warehouse. And I think the future isn't another Salesforce, it's the warehouse with some AI on top of it. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but
I agree, just based on our natural progression internally within Rippling is we store data in our warehouse, like first.
You probably ETL data out of Salesforce into your warehouse, then back into Salesforce.
Yeah,
right?
like it's crazy. Yeah. So I absolutely agree. Without having to go into the rigid lines and objects and field types and things that live in Salesforce, we a lot of times just want to ETL data straight to our warehouse. We transform it, we do a lot of stuff to it, and then we push it in a very selected format into Salesforce. And you can't imagine that's like the way of the future.
Yeah.
The gravity of those systems has become huge. I also think there's a second part, though, which is the way we interact with our systems is changing. And I think you're starting to see the first versions of this with like better text to speech. You're seeing better like reasoning capabilities come out of LLMs. And so I think that the world quickly becomes, how do you send this out to do things for you versus you like always stringing all the pieces together. And that interaction layer changing, I think, becomes exactly what you're talking about. Is like the systems will change to whatever our use case is. We've built a whole world on mouse and keyboard, and I think now we're starting to see a little bit of a different flavor.
5 minutes left. I think we could probably wrap a little bit early if there are any other questions. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, RevOps Co-op, you want to wrap this up or?
Sure. So of course, we're still open to taking questions, but as you exit, please do take the survey and let us know how we can get better as a community in terms of the webinar. I'm already seeing some thank yous and positive feedback, so that's always a good sign. And we'll give it another minute and then wrap it up. So do keep in mind, we do post the video recordings within 2 weeks to our video library on the website. And feel free to keep the conversation going in the community channels.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sweet. I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to let y'all go. Everyone have a fantastic day, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. We truly appreciate it.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you, Marshall. Thank you, Conrad.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Take care.